I always thought my marriage was solid. Emily and I had been together for nearly 8 years, and though we had our ups and downs, I believed we were in it for the long haul. We lived in a nice suburb, had a beautiful home, and even talked about starting a family. But lately, something felt off. It was subtle at first, just little things. She'd come home late from her yoga sessions, claiming traffic was heavy. I've never been one to jump to conclusions, so I brushed it off. But the changes in her behavior started piling up. She began dressing differently, wearing outfits that seemed more suited for a night out rather than a casual day at home. I caught her texting late at night, her face illuminated by the screen of her phone, but she always turned it away quickly when I walked in. When I asked her about it, she'd laugh it off, say I was being paranoid, and that her friends were just planning surprise parties or some other useless excuse. But it gnawed at me. Then there was the chauffeur. James was a nice guy, always polite and never intrusive, but there was something about the way Emily interacted with him that set off alarms in my head. She giggled at his jokes, touch his arm a bit too often when she thought I wasn't looking. It was infuriating and unsettling. I wanted to trust her, but my gut was screaming that something wasn't right. One Thursday evening, I came home early. I had a surprise planned for Emily, a nice dinner at our favorite restaurant. I had picked up a bottle of her favorite wine and was excited to see her reaction. But when I walked into the house, I was greeted by an empty living room. I called out for her, but no answer came. I shrugged it off and figured she was still out. But as I wandered into our bedroom, I noticed the sheets were rumpled, as if someone had recently been there. As I looked around, my eyes fell on her phone, charging on the bedside table. An impulse took over and I grabbed it. I felt a mix of excitement and dread as I scrolled through her messages. Most were mundane, just chats with friends, but my stomach dropped when I saw a thread with James. It started innocently enough, just a few texts about pickup times, but soon escalated into flirty banter and ended with him calling her babe. My heart raced, each message confirming my worst fears. I decided to wait for her return. I needed to confront her, but I also wanted to be calm and collected. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. When she finally walked through the door looking radiant and completely unsuspecting, I felt a pang of anger rise within me. "Hey, babe, you're home early," she chirped, setting her bag down. She looked so carefree, so happy, and it infuriated me. "Yeah, I wanted to surprise you, but it looks like you've already had a busy night," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean?" Her smile faltered, and I felt a rush of satisfaction. "Let's talk about James," I said, my voice low. Her face instantly changed, the color draining from her cheeks. "What do you mean?" she stammered, but I could see the panic in her eyes. I laid out the evidence, the messages I had read, the laughter I had witnessed. Her excuses came pouring out, fast and frantic. "It's not what you think, we were just being friendly, he's just a chauffeur." She tried to downplay everything, but I could see her facade cracking. There I was, heart pounding, feeling the weight of betrayal suffocating me. I couldn't believe this was happening. The woman I loved, the one I envisioned a future with, was betraying me with a guy I trusted. I felt like a fool, a total fool. As I listened to her excuses, I was enveloped in a whirlwind of emotions. Anger boiling within me, hurt slicing through my chest. I wanted to scream, to unleash every ounce of pain I felt. But instead I just stood there, stunned, waiting for her to finish. And when she finally did, I knew I had to make a decision. This couldn't go on. I felt a dark idea creeping into my mind. I would not only confront her but also take control of the situation. I would ensure she felt the consequences of her actions. The thought of her stranded with no way to get around fueled my resolve. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was about to come. The anger simmering within me was too much to contain. I had never imagined I would end up here, standing in my own home feeling like a stranger. Emily's excuses rang hollow, and I could feel every lie she told me slithering through the air like a noxious gas. I had to act, but I needed to be smart about it. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, and I had a plan forming in my mind. As Emily continued to plead her case, I cut her off. "You know what? I can't listen to this anymore. You've betrayed me. You've betrayed our marriage," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "And if you think I'm just going to forgive and forget, you're mistaken." She looked at me with wide eyes as if she still held some hope that I might back down. "Please, let's just talk about this," she begged, trying to reach for my arm, but I stepped back, putting physical distance between us. Her panic was palpable, and it only fueled my resolve. I didn't want to give her a chance to smooth things over or manipulate the situation. I had to think of my next steps carefully. I knew firing James, the chauffeur, would send a clear message. She would have no way to get around, and she would be forced to confront the reality of her actions. "I'm going to fire James," I stated bluntly. The look on her face was like a mix of horror and disbelief. "He won't be picking you up anymore. You'll have to figure it out on your own." "What? You can't do that. He's just doing his job," she exclaimed, her voice rising dramatically. But it didn't matter to me anymore. The betrayal felt personal, and I wanted her to feel the consequences of her decisions. "I can and I will," I replied, my voice cold. I didn't want to get into another round of arguments. I had made my decision, and as much as it hurt, I knew it was what I needed to do for myself. After that confrontation, I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins, and while I was reeling from the betrayal, I also felt empowered for the first time since I discovered her. Infidelity. I pulled out my phone and called the chauffeur service while Emily stood there, speechless and wide-eyed. "Hi, this is Mark. I need to speak to the manager about terminating my contract with your service, effective immediately." I spoke clearly, feeling a sense of satisfaction as I took action. I explained the situation, and the manager was understanding, though I could tell from their tone that they were surprised. Once I hung up, I turned to Emily, who was now sitting on the edge of the couch, her face buried in her hands. "You think this is funny?" she mumbled through her fingers, her voice muffled. "No, I don't think it's funny," I replied, my anger still simmering just below the surface. "But I can't just sit back and let you act like everything is normal. You've made your choice, and now you'll deal with the consequences." I watched as she finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Mark, I didn't mean to hurt you. It just happened. I didn't want to fall for him, I swear," she cried, her voice breaking. "Didn't want to?" I echoed, my voice rising. "You had a choice, Emily. You chose to cheat on me. This wasn't some accident. You didn't trip and fall into bed with him. You made a conscious decision, and now you want to act like a victim." The silence hung heavy in the air, thick with tension. I felt a mixture of sadness and anger, the realization that the woman I had loved was sitting in front of me, but she was no longer the same person I thought I knew. With each passing moment, the reality of our situation sank deeper into my mind. I could either let her manipulate me further or stand my ground. I chose the latter. After the confrontation, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do more. I wanted to make sure Emily faced the full fallout of her actions. I decided to look into everything she had done over the past few weeks to gather evidence of her deceit. I needed to arm myself with knowledge. I began by digging through her social media accounts, something I hadn't done before, respecting her privacy. But now I felt justified. I combed through her messages, her photos, everything I could find. Each click was painful, but I needed to see just how deep the betrayal ran. I wanted to know who else she had involved in this mess. As I sifted through her online presence, there was a part of me that felt like I was getting back some control. I was piecing together this puzzle, and each piece was a reminder of how far things had fallen. I found more messages, more exchanges that made my blood boil. James wasn't the only one. There were flirty texts with her friends, plans for nights out that didn't involve me, and photos from parties where she looked carefree and happy without me. The anger surged again, but there was also a sense of clarity. This was my reality now. Emily had chosen this path, and I would ensure she faced the consequences. I resolved to make my next move carefully, plotting a course that would leave her stranded, both literally and figuratively. As I sat there, scrolling through the evidence of her betrayal, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. I was no longer the victim. I was about to take charge. I would make sure she understood that actions have consequences. The days following my confrontation with Emily were a blur. I spent most of my time piecing together the timeline of her betrayal, but I also began planning my next steps. I was no longer the passive husband who just let things slide. I wanted to make sure she felt the weight of her decisions, a sense of justice that I craved. I fired James, and while that was satisfying, I knew I needed to do more. I started looking into her daily routines and how she managed her life without me. Emily had always depended on me for a lot of things, from handling the finances to driving her around. I noticed she had this comfortable lifestyle, one that I had largely provided, but now I was determined to strip that away, at least temporarily. I devised a plan. I decided to cut her off from our joint accounts and take back the keys to our car. I had a small sedan that I used for errands, but Emily primarily used a luxury SUV that we bought together. The moment I made that decision felt liberating. If I was going to ensure she felt the consequences, I had to take away the comfort she was used to. That Friday, I approached the bank where we had our joint accounts. It was a little nerve-wracking, but I felt empowered. I explained to the bank manager that I wanted to close our joint accounts and open one solely in my name. They were surprised but understood when I told them it was due to personal circumstances. I walked out with a renewed sense of purpose. When I got home, Emily was sitting on the couch, flipping through her phone. Looked up as I entered, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Where have you been?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. "Just handling some business," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral as I mentally prepared for the conversation that was about to unfold. "Business? What kind of business?" she pressed. "Just managing our finances," I said, trying to keep it vague. "Why, we always do that together," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Not anymore. I've decided to close our joint accounts. You'll have to manage on your own from now on," I said, watching her expression change from confusion to shock. "You can't do that, we're married," she exclaimed, standing up. "Funny how you seem to forget that when you're out cheating with your friends," I shot back, feeling the anger bubbling up again. "Stop bringing that up. I told you it was a mistake. I regret it." Her voice was rising now, and I could see her panic growing. "Regret doesn't change the fact that you've been lying to me. You'll have to figure things out on your own," I said, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. I didn't want to hurt her, but I needed her to face the reality of what she had done. Emily's expression shifted from anger to desperation. "What am I supposed to do? I can't just go without money. I need my car. You can't just take everything away from me." I stood my ground, feeling a twisted sense of enjoyment watching her squirm. "Your car? You mean the one that I pay for? The one you used to drive to meet James?" "I think not," I replied, my voice steady. "Mark, please. This isn't fair," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "I made a mistake, can't we just work through this together?" But I was done listening to her excuses. The woman who had stood before me just days ago, laughing with her lover, was now begging for mercy. I felt no sympathy. "You made your choice, Emily. It's time to see what life looks like when you can't rely on me," I said coldly. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving her to process what I had just done. I felt a mix of triumph and shame. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but the other part was still too raw from the betrayal. I had to remind myself that I was doing this for my own healing, to reclaim my life, and to show her the consequences of her actions. After that, I focused on my own life. I started spending time with friends, going out more, and rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. I joined a local gym and took up kickboxing, channeling my frustration into something productive. I felt stronger both physically and mentally, and I started to enjoy my independence. I also kept tabs on Emily. I couldn't help but notice how she struggled. Watching her try to manage without me was both satisfying and heartbreaking. She spent her days relying on friends for rides, posting desperate messages on social media about needing a lift, and complaining about how her life had turned upside down. I felt a sense of vindication. One evening, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, looking defeated. I could see the shadows under her eyes. She was exhausted from trying to juggle everything without my help. She looked up as I entered and quickly wiped a few tears from her cheeks. "Mark, can we please talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. I was torn. On one hand, I wanted to hear her out, but on the other, I wanted to maintain the upper hand. "What's there to talk about? You've made your choices." "I know," she whispered, her voice breaking, "but I can't keep going like this. You've taken everything away and I'm struggling. I'm sorry for what I did." I really am." For a moment I considered her sincerity, the glimmer of hope that perhaps she had learned a lesson. But then I remembered all the pain and betrayal. "Emily, you had your chance. You chose to betray me, and now you're facing the consequences. You need to understand that," I said, my heart hardened. "I know, and I don't expect you to take me back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm asking you to at least let me explain what happened." I hesitated, weighing my options. I could listen to her story, but did I really want to? Part of me wanted to know how she could betray me so easily, but another part wanted to keep my distance. "Fine," I said, crossing my arms. "You have 5 minutes, don't waste it." As she began to speak, I felt a mix of bitterness and curiosity. I had no idea what she would say next, but I was ready to listen. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for the right words. I felt my heart pounding, a mix of anticipation and wariness. I had given her 5 minutes to explain herself, but I wasn't sure what I hoped to hear. Would this be more of the same excuses, or would she finally take some responsibility for her actions? "Mark," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "I never meant for things to get out of hand. I was feeling so lost and disconnected. You were so consumed with work and I felt alone. I thought I was being supportive, but I didn't realize how much I needed you until it was too late." I rolled my eyes, wanting to cut her off, but I held my tongue. Part of me was curious to hear her rationalization. "I know that's not an excuse for what I did," she continued, her voice rising slightly with urgency. "But when James started giving me rides, it felt nice to have someone pay attention to me. I was flattered, he listened to me. I was just seeking something you weren't providing at the time." "So you thought cheating was the answer?" I shot back, unable to contain my frustration. "I know it sounds stupid now," she admitted, her face red with shame. "In the moment it didn't seem like a big deal. I thought it was just harmless flirting, but then it escalated. I didn't want to hurt you, I wanted to feel loved and appreciated." "Loved? You think a fling with a chauffeur somehow equates to love?" I asked incredulously. "Your actions say otherwise, Emily. Love doesn't betray." She looked down at her hands, her voice barely a whisper. I know this sounds terrible, but I felt like I was fading. And when I realized how much I was risking, it was already too late. I was in too deep. "Too deep," I echoed, my anger flaring again. "You think it's just a phase you can gloss over? You think you can tell me you were fading, and I'll just forget all the nights you spent lying to my face?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, and I could see the weight of her regret pressing down on her. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to understand that I made a colossal mistake, and I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it back. I wish I had just talked to you instead of running to someone else." Her admission hung in the air, heavy and thick. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy for her, but my anger was still fresh. "So, what do you want from me?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. "I want to rebuild what we had," she said, her eyes pleading. "I want to prove to you that I can change, that I can be the wife you deserve, but I need your help. I know it's asking a lot, but I'm willing to do anything." I stared at her, the desperation in her gaze striking a chord of conflict in my chest. I had loved her once deeply. The woman sitting before me still had remnants of the person I married, but the betrayal felt like a chasm too wide to cross. "Emily, I don't know if I can trust you again. You've shattered that trust, and it's going to take a lot more than apologies to fix this," I said, my voice firm. "I understand," she replied, her voice cracking. "I don't expect you to trust me right away, but I'm willing to do the work. I'll go to therapy. I'll open up my phone. I'll share everything. Just please don't shut me out completely." "Therapy?" I scoffed, the word feeling like a hollow promise. "You think a few sessions will just erase everything? What about the damage you've done to our marriage? What about the pain you've caused? I know it won't fix everything right away, but it's a start. I'm willing to do anything it takes, Mark. I don't want to lose you," she said, her voice filled with an urgency I hadn't heard before. I took a step back, shaking my head. "You want to rebuild, fine, but it's going to take time. And I'm not promising you anything. I need to think, and I need to see real change." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll do whatever it takes," she promised. "I'll prove to you that I can be the partner you need. Just give me a chance." Watching her cry, I felt a part of me softening. It was frustrating. I wanted to be resolute, to stick to my plan of letting her deal with the consequences. Yet there was a flicker of something in me that wanted to believe her. I found myself grappling with that flicker, torn between wanting to stay true to my anger and wanting to embrace the woman I had loved. "Right now, you're right, I don't know if I can trust you," I said, finally, softening my tone slightly. "But I won't shut the door completely. Just understand that this journey will be long and painful. I need to see genuine change, and you need to understand the gravity of what you've done." "I will," she replied, wiping her tears and looking at me earnestly. "I'll show you, I promise." As I walked away from the conversation, I felt the emotional turmoil within me. I was still angry, but I also felt a hint of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way back to me. But even if that were true, I knew it would take time. Time away from the comfort she had relied on, time spent rebuilding trust brick by brick. For now, I was cautiously willing to explore this new dynamic. I wouldn't forget what she did, but perhaps there was a way to move forward. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it, no matter how long it took. In the days that followed, I found myself in a peculiar position. Emily, desperate to win back my trust, began to change her behavior. She started going to therapy, something she had promised during our emotional confrontation. While I was initially skeptical, I watched as she took those first steps, and it felt like there was a flicker of hope, a promise of potential redemption. At first, I wasn't quite ready to embrace it. I maintained my distance, observing her from the sidelines. She was trying to involve me in her journey, sharing details about her sessions, explaining her feelings and reflecting on how she could change. But it felt strange, and it reminded me of how easily her words had once turned into lies. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I returned home to find her sitting in the living room, a nervous energy radiating off her. She had placed a small bouquet of flowers on the table, the kind that would have made me smile in better days. "Hey, I wanted to do something nice for you," she said, her voice bright but shaky. I looked at the flowers, then back at her. "Thanks," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "But you don't need to do this to win me over, I just need time." "I get that," she said quickly, her eyes earnest. "But I wanted to show you that I'm serious about changing. I've been digging deep in therapy, and I'm starting to understand how my actions affected you. I don't want to keep hiding from those feelings." That made me pause. I had to admit that I was surprised. The Emily sitting in front of me was not the same woman who had betrayed me so readily. But could I trust that this transformation was genuine? "Okay, let's hear it then," I said, crossing my arms. "What have you learned?" She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I've realized that I've been relying too much on external validation," she began. "I thought that by gaining attention from someone else it would fill this void I felt inside. But I know now that it was just a temporary high, and it led to the worst mistake of my life." Her sincerity struck a chord, and I found myself softening a bit. "And how do you plan to fill that void?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I want to focus on myself first, my self-esteem, my independence. I can't depend on you or anyone else to make me feel whole. And I want to rebuild our relationship, but I know that takes time and effort. I have to earn your trust back." I nodded slowly, her words resonating with me. I had never expected to hear this level of introspection, but as much as I wanted to acknowledge her progress, the wounds were still fresh. "I appreciate you sharing all this," I said cautiously. "But it's not just about your journey. I need to feel secure again, too. You've shattered my trust, and that's not something that can be rebuilt overnight." "I understand," she said, her voice steady, "and I'm willing to be patient. I just hope that you can see I'm serious about making amends." Over the next few weeks, I watched Emily work diligently on herself. It was strange seeing her so focused and committed. She was attending therapy regularly, taking on new hobbies, and even reaching out to friends she hadn't spoken to in ages. I could tell she was making an effort to reconnect with her own identity outside of our marriage, and it was a shift I hadn't expected. However, while I appreciated her efforts, I still struggled with the emotional aftermath. Every once in a while, a memory of her betrayal would flash through my mind, tainting the moments we shared. I found myself grappling with feelings of inadequacy and anger that danced just beneath the surface. One night, I returned home from the gym, feeling accomplished after a solid workout. Emily had prepared dinner, something she hadn't done in a long time, and the smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. For a moment it felt like the old days, and I found myself relaxing. "Wow, this looks amazing," I said, genuinely impressed. "Just a little something to celebrate our progress." She smiled, beaming with pride. It was hard not to smile back. We sat down to eat, and the conversation flowed more easily than it had in weeks. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of what we once had. We laughed, reminisced about good memories, and talked about our future. But that glimmer was quickly overshadowed by my own inner turmoil. As we cleared the plates, I felt a surge of guilt wash over me. Was I being too harsh? Was I shutting the door on a chance for real reconciliation? "Mark, are you okay?" Emily asked, her voice laced with concern. "You seem a bit distant." "I'm just thinking," I admitted, trying to hide my emotions. "It's hard to reconcile what we had with where we are now." "I get it," she said softly. "It's a process, and I'm here for you. We can take this one step at a time." "Can you really?" I asked, my voice tense. "You say that, but it's hard for me to let go of the past. I need to know you're not just saying these things to win me back." "I promise I'm not," she replied earnestly. "I'm working every day to show you I'm serious. I want our marriage to thrive, not just survive." It was a poignant moment, and I felt a lump form in my throat. For the first time, I could see a flicker of genuine effort, but in my heart I was scared. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of allowing myself to believe in a future that felt so fragile. I decided to share my fears with her. "I want to believe you, Emily, but I need help too. I'm scared of being vulnerable again. It's hard for me to forgive and let go." "I understand," she replied, reaching across the table to take my hand. "But I want you to know that I'm here. I'll do whatever it takes to help us heal together. This isn't just about me anymore, it's about us." As I looked into her eyes, I saw a mixture of hope and sincerity that tugged at my heartstrings. I realized this wasn't just a battle for trust. It was a battle for the love we once had. That night, as we sat together reflecting on the road ahead, I felt the weight of the past slowly lifting. I still had a long way to go, but perhaps there was a chance we could navigate this tumultuous path together. We were both broken in different ways, but maybe we could find our way back to each other, one cautious step at a time. The journey would be difficult, filled with uncertainty and rebuilding. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were heading in the right direction. I wasn't ready to fully embrace the possibility of reconciliation, but with every passing day, I could see a faint light breaking through the darkness. And maybe, just maybe, that light was enough to guide us home. As the weeks turned into months, Emily and I found ourselves navigating the rocky terrain of reconciliation. Each day was a delicate balance of progress and setbacks, but we were both committed to the journey, however daunting it might be. I could feel the tension in our home slowly dissipating, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. Emily continued her therapy, and I started attending sessions of my own. It was liberating to have a safe space to express my feelings, my anger, and my fears. I learned to confront my emotions instead of burying them, and I began to understand that healing is not linear. It has its ups and downs. In therapy, I was encouraged to communicate openly with Emily about my feelings. I wanted to articulate my struggles while still acknowledging her efforts. One evening, as we sat on the couch after a long day, I decided to share what had been on my mind. "Emily," I began, taking a deep breath, "I appreciate everything you're doing. I see the changes you're making, and I want you to know that it's not going unnoticed, but I'm still working through a lot of pain." "I get that," she said softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "I'm prepared for this to take time. I just want you to be honest with me, no matter how difficult it is." "I will," I promised, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "But can we also talk about boundaries? I think it's important that we establish what we both need moving forward." "Absolutely," she replied, her expression earnest. "What do you need?" I took a moment to collect my thoughts. "I need you to be transparent with me. If something is bothering you, I want you to speak up. No more hiding or running away from tough conversations. I think that's how we can rebuild trust." "Definitely," she agreed. and I need the same from you. I want to know that I can trust you to share your feelings, even if they're hard to hear. That conversation opened the floodgates to a new chapter in our relationship. Gradually, we began to engage in deeper discussions, tackling tough topics that we'd previously shied away from. We rediscovered each other, having real conversations about our dreams, our fears, and our expectations for the future. One Friday night, after a particularly intense week, we decided to change things up and go to our favorite restaurant. It was a place that held many good memories for us, and I thought it might help rekindle some of the warmth we had lost. As we sat across from each other, I could feel the tension easing between us. "Mark, this feels nice," Emily said, her smile genuine. "I'm glad we're doing this." "Me too," I replied, feeling a smile creeping onto my face. "It feels like a step in the right direction." We talked and laughed, reminiscing about the good times and making tentative plans for the future. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of joy, a reminder of what we once had, and a glimpse of what we might become again. As we left the restaurant, the night air was cool, and I felt a sense of possibility. We walked hand in hand, both acutely aware of the fragility of our situation but also hopeful for what lay ahead. Yet I knew there were still challenges to come. Trust is a delicate thing. Once shattered, it takes time to mend. I could feel the echoes of the past lurking in the back of my mind, but I was determined to move forward, not allowing the shadows of her betrayal to eclipse the potential for renewal. A few weeks later, I arrived home after work to find a package waiting for me at the door. I opened it to reveal a small notebook, beautifully bound with a note attached from Emily. "I thought we could start writing down our thoughts and feelings," she wrote. "A way to share our journey as we rebuild. I want to commit to this together." I felt a rush of appreciation for her thoughtfulness. That simple gesture spoke volumes about her dedication to our relationship. I realized she was truly committed to making things right, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. In the months that followed, we filled that notebook with our hopes, our dreams, our fears, and even our frustrations. It became a vital part of our healing process, a tangible reminder of our commitment to one another. As the seasons changed, so did we. We learned to communicate better, to embrace vulnerability, and to forgive, not just each other but ourselves. Every day brought new challenges, but with each passing moment, we grew closer, more united in our resolve to reclaim our love. We were far from perfect, and I knew that we would face obstacles in the future, but I also knew that we had the tools to overcome them together. I had learned that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice, a commitment to weather the storms and celebrate the sunny days. And so, as we sat together one evening, laughing and talking about our future plans, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I looked over at Emily, her laughter ringing in my ears, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were truly on the right path. We had both learned from our mistakes, and while the scars of betrayal would remain, they had also become a part of our story, a story that we were writing together, one day at a time. In that moment, I realized that sometimes the journey of healing can lead you back to love, stronger than before. And while the road ahead was still uncertain, I was ready to face it with Emily by my side.